The radar operator stares at his screen, he blinks once, then again. The signatures are everywhere, hundreds of them appearing almost simultaneously across the Taiwan Strait. For a moment, no one speaks. Then the alarm begins. It is 3:47 in the morning, local time, on a Tuesday, and somewhere in a command center buried beneath a mountain on the eastern coast of Taiwan, a general picks up the phone and says 3 words he has rehearsed for 30 years. He says, "This is real. What follows in the next 72 hours will determine the future of the global order. The balance of military power in the Pacific, the price of every semiconductor on Earth, and the question that no war game, no think tank, no intelligence agency has ever been able to fully answer. Can Taiwan survive?" Before we continue, subscribe and press the bell icon and tell me in the comment section what's in your mind about this situation. To understand what is about to unfold, you need to understand one thing clearly. Taiwan is not just an island. It is a 36,000 square kilometer piece of geography that sits at the center of the most important strategic competition in the modern world. It produces over 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors, the chips inside your phone, your car, your hospital, your military aircraft. Most of them trace back to a factory on this island. China has claimed Taiwan as its own territory since 1949. The People's Liberation Army, the PLA, has spent the last 20 years building one specific capability, the ability to take it back by force. The United States has spent the same 20 years trying to make that cost too high to pay, and Taiwan itself has spent those 20 years in an impossible position, too small to win a direct war with China, too important to be abandoned, too democratic to surrender. This is the scenario that keeps the world's most senior military planners awake at night, and in this simulation, it begins not with a declaration, not with a warning, but with a radar signature at 3:47 in the morning. The first thing Taiwan's military detects is not aircraft. It is ships. Over the course of the previous 36 hours, China's Eastern Theater Command has quietly repositioned an extraordinary concentration of naval assets, landing ships, amphibious assault vessels, escort destroyers, missile frigates, submarine signatures that have suddenly gone dark. It was framed publicly as a routine military exercise, the 7th such exercise in 18 months. No one wanted to be the one to say it was different this time. But at 3:47 a.m., the sheer scale of what appears on radar makes the word exercise impossible. Taiwan's president is woken within minutes. The call to Washington follows seconds later. In the Situation Room at the White House, aides begin making their own calls. The Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Director of the CIA. Within 8 minutes, the National Security Council is being assembled on a secure video line. In Tokyo, Japan's self-defense forces raise their alert status quietly, without public announcement. In Guam, 2 carrier strike groups receive an encrypted order. The order is a single word, move, but here is what most people don't account for in this first hour. China's opening move is not the ships. The ships are the distraction. Before a single PLA soldier touches Taiwanese soil, Taiwan's digital infrastructure begins to fail. At 4:12 a.m., Taiwan's primary telecommunications hub in Taipei experiences a cascade failure. It looks like a hardware malfunction. Engineers begin rerouting traffic. At 4:19 a.m., the Taoyuan International Airport's air traffic control system crashes. Backup systems engage. The airport is placed in emergency mode. At 4:31 a.m., Taiwan's presidential office network goes dark. Encrypted emergency channels activate. This is not coincidence. This is the opening layer of China's Campaign A. Coordinated cyber attack of extraordinary scale, months in the planning, targeting Taiwan's communication architecture, power grid switching systems, financial clearing networks, and military command and control links. The goal is not total blackout. Total blackout would be obvious and uncontrollable. The goal is friction, slowing Taiwan's decision-making, disrupting coordination, creating confusion in the critical first hours when speed is everything. What most people don't realize is that this cyber attack was itself preceded by something even more invisible, a disinformation operation that has been running for 3 months, quietly seeding false information into Taiwan's military logistics networks, fake maintenance alerts, incorrect fuel inventory reports, corrupted ammunition readiness data. By the time Taiwan's military commanders are trying to mobilize, some of their most basic operational data cannot be trusted. This is modern warfare, and it has already begun. At 5:02 a.m., the missiles launch, not from ships, from the mainland. The PLA rocket force China's strategic missile arm fires the opening salvo of what will become the largest ballistic missile barrage in the history of warfare. The first wave consists of approximately 400 DF-16 and DF-17 ballistic and hypersonic glide missiles. Their targets are not cities, not civilian infrastructure. Their targets are very specific: Taiwan's air defense radar sites, its air force bases, its missile batteries, its command bunkers, and the runway systems at its military airfields. The logic is surgical. Destroy Taiwan's ability to contest the sky before the ships arrive. Taiwan's Patriot batteries engage. Some missiles are intercepted, but the sheer volume of the salvo overwhelms the intercept capacity. In the first 40 minutes, 7 of Taiwan's 9 active Air Force bases sustain runway damage, 3 radar installations go offline, 1 command bunker takes a direct hit, casualties in the first hour of missile strikes unknown. The confusion makes accounting impossible. In Washington, the NSC watches the strike data coming in through satellite feeds and liaison channels. The question being asked in the Situation Room is the same question being asked in every NATO capital, in Tokyo, in Seoul, in Canberra. Do we intervene now? The answer in hour 3 is still not yet, because intervening now before Taiwan's government formally invokes its defense relationships, before the legal and diplomatic framework is established, would mean the United States firing the first shot against China, and firing the first shot against a nuclear-armed power is not a decision made in hour 3. Dawn breaks over the Taiwan Strait, and what is visible from satellite is unlike anything seen since the Second World War. The Eastern Theater Command has launched what the PLA internally calls the Joint Island Attack Campaign. Over 100 landing ships, dozens of amphibious assault vessels carrying hovercraft, armored vehicles, and assault infantry. Above them, a continuous air umbrella of J-20 and J-16 fighters. Ahead of them, submarine-launched cruise missiles continuing to suppress Taiwan's coastal defenses. The crossing distance from the Chinese coast to Taiwan is approximately 180 kilometers at its narrowest point. At the speed of a military convoy, that crossing takes between 8 and 12 hours. Taiwan has a window. In Taipei, what remains of the government's command structure is operating from hardened underground facilities. The decision is made: Taiwan will not surrender the coastline without a fight. F-16 squadrons that survived the missile strike scramble from dispersal locations on civilian roads, a tactic Taiwan has trained for specifically. Naval fast attack missile boats leave port under radio silence. Mobile artillery units reposition inland. Taiwan is hurt badly, but it is not broken. Meanwhile, 2,000 kilometers away, the USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group has increased speed to flank and is now cutting through the Philippine Sea at 30 knots. The USS Carl Vinson Group is 4 hours behind. They are not yet in strike range of the Taiwan Strait. They are also, now under specific orders: observe, do not engage. This is the most dangerous moment, not because war is escalating, but because the world's most powerful military is watching, calculating, and not yet moving, and in Beijing, that calculation is already factored in. At 1:14 p.m. local time, the first PLA amphibious units make contact with the western coast of Taiwan. The initial landing zones are on the flat agricultural plains of the western coastal corridor areas the PLA has modeled and war-gamed extensively: the beaches near Taichung, the lowland approaches south of Hsinchu. The first wave is not infantry. It is engineering vehicles and hovercraft pushing through surf under anti-armor fire from dug-in Taiwanese positions. The resistance is significant. Taiwan's military has spent years preparing asymmetric defensive positions, anti-tank guided missiles, minefields, improvised urban barriers. The strategy is not to stop the landing. Stopping a force this size on a beach is impossible. The strategy is to make every meter of advance cost something. In the first 3 hours of beach combat, the PLA sustains losses it did not publicly model. Armored vehicles hit mines in the surf zone. Landing craft are struck by coastal missile batteries that survived the initial barrage by sheltering in mountain tunnels. Helicopter-borne assault units encounter prepared defensive positions in villages that were supposed to be unoccupied. This is where things become critical. The PLA's entire campaign timeline is built around a 72-hour assumption: seize key terrain, establish air superiority, and present the world with a fait accompli, a completed invasion before the United States can meaningfully intervene. Every hour of delay is a problem, and Taiwan is buying hours. In Brussels, an emergency NATO summit is convened. The debate inside the chamber is fierce. NATO's charter covers member territory. Taiwan is not a member, but 3 NATO members, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, have significant Pacific interests and defense relationships in the region. The question is not whether NATO as a collective body will intervene. The question is what individual members will do. Germany calls for immediate de-escalation dialogue. France signals it is closely monitoring. The United Kingdom announces it is repositioning its carrier strike group HMS Prince of Wales toward the South China Sea. Japan is the most critical variable. Japan's self-defense forces are already at maximum readiness. U.S. bases on Japanese soil, Okinawa, Yokota, Misawa, are central to any American military response in the Pacific. If Japan allows the United States to use those bases for offensive operations against China, it becomes a party to the conflict. China will treat it as such. In Tokyo, the Prime Minister convenes an emergency cabinet session. The decision will define Japan's foreign policy for a generation. At 2:47 p.m. local time, Japan announces U.S. bases on Japanese territory may be used for defensive and humanitarian support operations. The language is careful, deliberately ambiguous, but in Beijing it is read clearly. Japan has chosen a side. By hour 18, the military situation on Taiwan has become a grinding, street-by-street, field-by-field battle across the island's western coastal plain. PLA forces have established a beachhead approximately 15 kilometers deep in 2 separate landing zones. They have taken the outer perimeter of 1 secondary port facility. They have not taken Taipei, they have not taken Taichung, they have not achieved the operational objectives required by their 72-hour timeline. The PLA commander's choice is now stark: escalate the missile campaign to include civilian infrastructure, power stations, water facilities, communications towers to psychologically break Taiwanese resistance, or continue the grinding advance and accept a longer campaign. Both choices carry catastrophic risk. Striking civilian infrastructure creates the international optics that Washington needs to justify full intervention. A longer campaign gives American carrier groups time to reach strike range. In Beijing, this debate is happening at the highest levels of the Politburo Standing Committee, and here is the detail that almost no one is discussing publicly. China has placed its nuclear forces on elevated alert status, not launch posture, but elevated readiness, enough for American satellites to detect, enough to send a message. The message is this: do not escalate this into a direct US-China war. Washington receives the message 24 hours after the first radar signature appeared on a screen in Taiwan. The President of the United States addresses the nation. The speech is measured, firm. It does not use the word war. It announces the United States will provide Taiwan with all necessary material support, will enforce a maritime exclusion zone around the island to prevent additional PLA reinforcement by sea, and will position American forces to defend freedom of navigation and deter further escalation. It stops just short of direct combat engagement. In military terms, this means American submarines have already begun sinking PLA resupply vessels attempting to reinforce the beachhead. American aircraft operating from outside the range of Chinese air defenses are beginning to strike PLA logistics nodes. American electronic warfare platforms are blinding Chinese command networks. The United States is in the war. It simply hasn't said so. But what happens next changes everything. At 11:34 p.m. on day 1, a PLA anti-ship ballistic missile, the DF-21D, strikes the USS Chancellorsville, a guided missile cruiser operating in support of the Ronald Reagan Strike Group. The ship does not sink, but there are American casualties. American blood has been drawn. The mood in Washington shifts in a way that cannot be undone. The strike on USS Chancellorsville changes the political calculus instantly. The President convenes the National Security Council at midnight. The legal authorities are reviewed. The rules of engagement are rewritten. By 2:00 a.m., American EFA-18 and F-35 strike packages launched from the Ronald Reagan begin striking. PLA surface combatants in the Taiwan Strait directly. The United States and China are now in direct armed conflict. In the hours that follow, the scale of the naval battle in the Taiwan Strait becomes something unprecedented in modern history. PLA naval forces, despite sustaining significant losses from American strikes, continue pushing reinforcement convoys toward the Taiwanese beachhead. They are trying to make the land battle irreversible before the American naval presence can fully establish dominance. American submarines, some of the most advanced in the world, begin prosecuting PLA submarine contacts throughout the western Pacific. In the skies above the strait, the largest aerial engagement since the Korean War unfolds over 3 days. J-20s against F-35s over water at supersonic speeds, with the fate of an island of 23 million people below them. This is where the scenario diverges from what Beijing's planners predicted. Taiwan holds, not because its military stops the PLA still controls 2 coastal beachheads. The western plains are partially occupied. Parts of Taiwan's industrial infrastructure have been badly damaged. Taiwan holds because the 72-hour window has closed. The moment American carrier aviation enters the battle, the PLA's ability to resupply and reinforce its beachheads becomes extraordinarily difficult. The logistics chain across 180 kilometers of open water under attack from American submarines, cruise missiles, and naval aviation begins to strain. The PLA ground forces on Taiwan are now fighting with limited resupply. Their fuel is being counted, their ammunition is being rationed. In Beijing, the Politburo faces a scenario its war games did not fully account for, a military operation that has begun but cannot be completed cleanly, and an adversary that has engaged directly. Behind the scenes, a bigger shift is happening. The global economic consequences are beginning to cascade in ways that affect everyone. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company TSMC has activated its continuity protocols. Advanced manufacturing equipment has been shut down and partially hardened. Key technical personnel have been evacuated to backup facilities abroad. The world's supply of leading-edge semiconductors has just been interrupted. Within 48 hours, the stock markets of every major economy begin to price in a semiconductor famine. Tech stocks collapse, automotive production lines halt, defense procurement agencies begin making emergency calls. The economic shock of the Taiwan conflict, even without nuclear escalation, is already being called the most significant supply chain disruption in history.